The ultimatum had been simple. Withdraw Terran forces from contested space, dismantle outer colonies, submit to Council oversight, or face annihilation. The message had arrived on every major Terran channel, their arrogant sigil spinning above the text, broadcast in all known galactic tongues. High Admiral Grant Keller read it from the command deck of the TNS Revenant, a towering spearhead of humanity's warfleet. The words meant nothing to him. He wasn't a diplomat. He'd served through the border wars, watched comrades die to Council proxy fleets, seen human freighters raided under the pretense of trade violations. Now, the Council had the nerve to threaten Earth itself. Keller crushed the datapad in his gauntleted fist. Around him, the command deck crew waited, tense. No one spoke. They'd all seen the transmission. They all knew what it meant. The Council didn't issue ultimatums as a bluff. They expected compliance, and if humanity didn't bow, the fleets of half a dozen species would descend on Terran space. Except this time, they'd made a mistake. The Revenant wasn't the only ship in orbit around Vega Prime. 3 full Terran battle groups had rendezvoused here in deep space, quietly, unnoticed. They'd been training, upgrading weapons, testing new strategies born from bitter experience. The old treaties had meant nothing. Earth had prepared for this day. Keller's voice cut through the silence, cold and calm. "Transmit my response." A comms officer hesitated. "Sir, the Council will intercept within minutes. If we answer, it commits us—" "I'm aware." Keller's stare was unflinching. "Transmit." The officer obeyed. Across thousands of light years, a single message left the Revenant's array. Ultimatums are for those who hold the high ground. You do not. Retaliation begins now. Hours later, humanity's fleets moved. It wasn't broadcast on the news feeds. There was no public spectacle, no fanfare. The Council thought the Terran Empire fractured, desperate, held together by wounded pride and weak alliances. They didn't know about the Black Fleets, the ones that hadn't been listed in any treaty, whose shipyards orbited dark moons and dead stars. Ships with hulls designed to absorb and scatter enemy sensors, plasma torpedoes that could punch through the vaunted Council shields, strike teams bred for boarding actions without mercy or restraint. Keller rode at the spear point, commanding the first wave. His orders had been blunt. Cripple every forward Council base within reach. No quarter, no prisoners. As Revenant's fleet dropped out of FTL near the Volar Nexus, a key staging point for Council forces, alarms screamed across the alien stations. Defense platforms scrambled fighters, warships moved to intercept. Too late. The Terran war doctrine wasn't pretty. It wasn't about honor or balance. It was about winning, hard, fast, and absolute. "Fire at will," Keller ordered. A wall of kinetic slugs and plasma tore into the first enemy line. Shield signatures flared and failed. Council ships scattered, but humanity didn't pursue in open combat. They closed, hammering command decks, engine cores, life support. They wanted the stations gutted. Minutes stretched like hours. In the thick of it, Keller barely registered the kill reports, the screams over enemy comms. All that mattered was the result. Volar Nexus burned. By the time the last Council flagship limped out of range, the stations were slagged metal drifting through space. On the bridge of the battered flagship CSV Hierarch, Council Lord Drelkoth watched in disbelief as reports flooded in, not just from Volar, but across 3 sectors. Coordinated human strikes. Fleet groups appearing where no Terran force should be able to operate. "This is impossible," one of his aides whispered. "They should have been scattered." Drelkoth slammed a clawed fist on the console. "They weren't. They retaliated." Back on the Revenant, Keller stood before the stars, silent. The battle was done. For now. But this was only the first blow. The Council thought it could threaten humanity into submission. They would learn. No ultimatum survived Terran retaliation. The silence after the battle was never comforting. Not for Keller. On the Revenant's deck, the stars seemed colder, harder somehow, after Volar Nexus had been reduced to wreckage. The Terran fleet drifted among the burned-out remains of council stations. Drones swept the area, collecting intelligence, confirming kills. Fires still burned on the station shells, oxygen venting from shattered habitats, cargo pods spinning aimlessly through the void. "Status?" Keller asked, breaking the quiet. His XO, Commander Jared Holt, turned from the holo display. The man looked tired, eyes sunken, but sharp as ever. "Primary objectives complete. Volar's gone. No intact command nodes left. We've logged 36 enemy vessels confirmed destroyed, another 24 disabled or abandoned. Civilian transports mostly fled or surrendered." Keller's jaw tightened. "Civilians?" Holt shook his head. "We stayed on target. No deliberate strikes against non-combatants." "Good. Humanity had a reputation now, earned through blood. The Council loved to paint Terrans as brutal, unrestrained, little better than pirates. They wanted propaganda, something to justify their so-called enforcement actions. Keller wouldn't give them that, but neither would he show weakness. "Any Council fleets moving to intercept?" Keller asked. Holt hesitated. "Not yet. But we've intercepted partial comms. Chaotic. The Council's scrambling. We think they didn't expect this level of response." Of course they hadn't. They still believed their own lies. That Earth was desperate, outmatched, isolated. That humanity would cave to threats like the smaller worlds had. They hadn't learned. But they would. In orbit above Council core world Aralath, deep within Council space, panic spread like wildfire through the ruling chambers. Lord Drelkoth paced in front of the other Council lords, his scaled form coiled tight with fury. Holofeeds displayed images from Volar, grainy, terrifying, massive Terran ships moving with surgical precision, devastating defenses that should have held for weeks. Council fleets outmaneuvered, outgunned. "This is madness," one of the avian councilors squawked. "Humans were meant to be broken, isolated after the last trade sanctions. How did they field such a fleet?" Drelkoth's gaze burned. "Because we underestimated them, again." "They must have violated treaty restrictions," another councilor began. "Treaties!" Drelkoth roared, slamming his fist on the table. "We issued an ultimatum. We gave them no choice but to fight, and now they are fighting." Silence followed. No one wanted to say what they all thought. The Council's fleets were vast, yes, but stretched thin, guarding trade routes, enforcing dominance over a fractious galaxy. They weren't prepared for an all-out war, not against a foe that didn't play by their rules. And humanity had never played by their rules. A day later, the second wave began. Keller stood before his assembled fleet commanders aboard Revenant. The holomap displayed 6 new targets: forward logistics hubs, refueling depots, minor shipyards, all deep in Council-controlled space, all crucial to their war machine. "This is not a defensive action anymore," Keller told them, voice steady, eyes cold. "The Council has declared war in everything but name. We're going to take the fight to them, hard, fast, no time for them to consolidate." The commanders nodded. No one protested. They knew what was at stake. If Earth fell, humanity as a species would face extinction or enslavement. The Council didn't forgive rebellion. They crushed it, burned it out of history. Not this time. The strikes came without warning. Terran black fleets leapt from dark space, bypassing known jump lanes, appearing where no one thought they could. At Lyra Station, an unguarded Council logistics hub, Terran Marines dropped in hard, clearing the station deck by deck. Footage captured brutal close-quarters combat. armored Terran soldiers cutting through defenders with cold efficiency. Within 4 hours, the entire station was destroyed, along with enough Council fuel reserves to supply a fleet for months. At Varan shipyards, prototype Council cruisers were left half-completed in their cradles, helpless as Terran torpedo barrages reduced them to molten slag. 6 targets, 6 successes. No Terran losses beyond a handful of strike teams. Keller received the after-action reports with grim satisfaction. The Council wouldn't be able to hide this. News was already leaking. Pirate networks, fringe traders carrying word of the retaliatory strikes. Humanity had not only answered the ultimatum, they were winning. But Keller knew better than to celebrate too soon. The Council wouldn't stay paralyzed forever. They would regroup, and when they did, they would bring everything. "Intel update," Holt said one evening as Keller reviewed deployment orders. "Go." Council fleets massing at Draylen Gate. Reports suggest at least 2 core sector armadas. They'll move on Terran space within days. Keller nodded slowly. Expected. "Have we confirmed fleet strength?" Holt's expression darkened. "Heavy. We're talking super capitals. Dreadnoughts. They're bringing in the Elder war fleets. They've realized this is existential now." "Good. Let them come." Keller's fingers drummed against the console. He'd bled under those Elder fleets once, seen Earth's skies darkened by Council bombardments. He hadn't forgotten. But this time, Earth had prepared. Back in Terran High Command, deep beneath the Atlantic defense bunker, messages from Revenant and the outer fleets arrived in encrypted bursts. Grand Marshal Anton Briggs, grizzled, blunt, no patience for Council politics, read them in silence. When he was done, he turned to his staff. "You all see it. The Council's coming. This is it." A young officer swallowed hard. "Sir, do we have enough to hold them? Their combined fleets—" Briggs cut him off with a glare. "Enough with that coward talk. We've waited for this. Our fleets are ready. Our ground forces are ready. The Black fleets have cleared the path. Now we bleed them." The room fell silent. Every officer there had family on Earth, on Mars, on the outer colonies. There was no surrender option. Briggs keyed in a command. A secure line opened to Keller aboard Revenant. "Admiral Keller, Marshal, you've done well. Now it's time to draw them in, hold them in contested space, buy us time to mobilize full defenses around Earth." Keller's gaze was flint. "Understood. We'll make them pay for every meter." The Council armadas moved faster than anyone thought possible. Within 3 days, 6 massive fleets crossed the outer sectors, pushing hard toward Terran borders. Council broadcasts declared it an enforcement action against rogue Terran aggression. The usual lies. But across neutral worlds, doubt spread. The footage from Volar, Lyra, Varan couldn't be denied. Humanity hadn't struck first, but they were certainly striking back. And now, the real war was coming. Aboard Revenant, Keller watched the fleet status feeds, line after line of Terran ships jumping to new intercept positions, mines seeded across likely approach vectors, stealth drones feeding in real-time data on the Council's advance. They were coming straight into the teeth of the Terran defense net. Holt approached. "Sir, final message from Marshal Briggs." Keller read it once. "Hold. Bleed them. No retreat. Earth stands." He closed the file. No more orders were needed. He turned to his command crew, voice steady as iron. "You heard the Marshal. No Council fleet passes us. They want Earth? They'll have to go through us first." The crew answered as one. "Aye, Admiral." As the Council supercapitals emerged from FTL across the edge of Terran space, scanners flared red. The trap was set. Keller watched the first enemy vanguard appear, a wall of dreadnoughts and cruisers, flanked by swarms of escort vessels. A force meant to intimidate, to overwhelm by sheer mass. But humanity didn't fight fair. "Phase 1, Keller ordered. "Engage." Minefields detonated across the enemy's flanks, tearing apart their formations before they could stabilize. Kinetic lance platforms hidden in asteroid fields opened fire, punching through Council shields. Then the Black Fleets emerged, Terran ships decloaking behind the enemy vanguard, hitting them from the rear with brutal precision. The stars lit with war. And at the heart of it, on the Revenant's bridge, Keller stood unflinching, watching the opening battle unfold. This was only the beginning. The Council had given an ultimatum. Now they would pay the price for it, in blood and fire. The stars looked like they were on fire. From the Revenant's command deck, Admiral Keller watched as Phase 1 of the Terran ambush tore through the Council vanguard. Dozens of Council cruisers drifted helplessly, engines blown out, hulls venting plasma. Minefield detonations had crippled their formation before they could even bring their weapons to bear. Now the real fight began. "Black Fleet elements reporting successful infiltration," Holt said, eyes locked on the shifting tactical map. "Rearguard Council elements already under assault." Keller nodded. "Good. Keep them disoriented. Phase 2, advance all battle groups. Cut their escape vectors." "Aye, sir." The Terran battle groups surged forward in a classic pincer maneuver, but with brutal modern efficiency. These weren't the fleets of the early wars. Terran warships had evolved from bitter experience, every design, every tactic forged through loss and blood. Broadside carriers, once thought obsolete, now packed with long-range rail batteries capable of tearing through even Council super-capital armor. Corvette swarms, small, fast, hard to target, equipped with next-gen stealth coatings and EMP missiles that turned enemy sensors into blind spots. And above them all, the Revenant itself, flagship of the fleet, a dreadnought beyond anything the Council believed Terrans could field. Its twin spinal rail cannons alone could shear an enemy cruiser in two with a single shot. The first rail volley fired. The ship's entire frame vibrated as 10-meter-long slugs accelerated to near-relativistic speeds, streaking across the void. Council command cruisers tried to maneuver, but too late. The lead supercapital Vathran's Pride took the full hit amidships. A second later, it came apart. Splintered bulkheads, boiling atmosphere, a debris field spinning where a mighty warship had been. Keller's eyes narrowed. One down. Many more to go. But the Council was no cowardly force. Even caught in disarray, their core armadas began regrouping, flagships rallying escorts, heavy cruisers forming overlapping shield formations. Streams of plasma fire and guided munitions lanced toward the oncoming Terran fleet. Several Terran destroyers vanished in white-hot flashes, killed instantly as Council gunnery crews found their mark. "Enemy adapting, Admiral," Holt reported, sweat beading on his brow. "Their second line's locking down approach vectors. If we don't press now—" "We press," Keller said coldly. "Signal Wolfpack squadrons. Time for them to earn their pay." Wolfpack wasn't an official designation. It was an old Terran naval nickname, born in backwater skirmishes. It referred to Terran hunter-killer groups, small task forces of fast corvettes and stealth frigates, operating outside normal fleet patterns. While the Council focused on Terran heavies, the Wolfpacks slid into their rear, jamming comms, sabotaging shield networks, launching precision strikes against vulnerable logistics ships. The effect was immediate. Council formations staggered, shield overlaps disrupted, command coherence breaking down. Aboard the Council flagship CSV Hierarch, Lord Drelkoth saw the chaos firsthand. "Report. Why are our sensor nets collapsing?" he snarled. "Unknown Terran tactics," his tactical officer hissed. "They're inside our lines, jamming, striking supply nodes. We can't pin them down." Drelkoth's scaled fists clenched. He'd warned the Council. The humans weren't to be underestimated. Now, too late, the others were learning. Back aboard Revenant, Keller saw the shift. Council lines wavering under relentless pressure. "Now," he ordered, "bring in the Hades Wings." Hades Wings, Terran heavy strike squadrons, composed of assault cruisers and carrier escorts designed for one job: break enemy lines. As the battered Council Center struggled to stabilize, Hades Wings emerged from FTL micro-jumps, point-blank in their formation. A brutal exchange followed, plasma torpedoes slamming into Council hulls, anti-fighter cannons tearing apart desperate defense swarms. Keller watched dispassionately as another Council dreadnought, Tal Varesh, suffered multiple reactor breaches, its glowing hull spiraling apart in a final death spin. Council flagship broadcasting distress signals on all channels, Holt said grimly. "They're calling for reinforcements." "Let them," Keller replied. His tone was iron. "By the time help arrives, there won't be much left to save." But the fight wasn't one-sided. Even under assault, Council battle experience showed. In the third hour of combat, they pulled off a brutal counterstroke, concentrated beam salvos targeting the Terran center wing. 4 Terran cruisers died in rapid succession, one breaking apart so close that Revenant itself shook from the blast wave. Holt's face tightened. "Our loss is rising, sir." Keller nodded once. Expected. War wasn't bloodless. "Shift phase shields. Bring reserves forward. No ground given." And still, the battle raged. 6 hours in, space was littered with wreckage. Glowing debris fields drifting through the battlefield, navigation a nightmare for both sides. But the difference was clear. Terran morale held. Council discipline cracked. "Enemy flagship attempting withdrawal," Holt reported suddenly. Keller's eyes narrowed. "Cowards. Target priority. Hierarch dies." Revenant's rail cannons pivoted, charged for another devastating shot. 2 Titanic slugs launched. Across space, they smashed through the battered Council lines, striking CSV Hierarch amidship. The flagship buckled, its command tower torn free in an expanding fireball. "Target destroyed," Holt confirmed moments later. Across the command deck, no cheers, just grim, cold focus. One battle won, war far from over. As the battered remains of the Council fleet broke formation and fled, Keller surveyed the ruined starfield. 6 Terran ships had been lost, hundreds of crew dead. The price had been steep. But the Council's unstoppable armada was shattered. Terran space still held. Earth still stood. Later, in the after-action briefing, Keller stood before his remaining captains. "You did well," he said bluntly. "We've bloodied them, hard. The Council's learned this isn't a war they can dictate." He paused, gaze hard. "But they'll come again, stronger, more desperate. We won't have the element of surprise next time." Back in Council space, panic spread. News of the defeat couldn't be hidden. Worlds under Council rule whispered, the humans fought back. They destroyed a core armada. The Terran retaliation is real. On Erelath, Council chambers were in uproar, factions blaming each other, terrified of what came next. And Lord Drelkoth, burned but alive, sent a message to his surviving warlords. This is no longer an enforcement action. It is war, total war. Prepare accordingly. Aboard Revenant, Keller stood alone in his quarters. Earth had survived the first blow. But this was far from over. The Council would escalate. And when they did, he'd be ready. The first blow had landed, hard. But no one on Revenant believed the war was won. Least of all, Admiral Keller. In the aftermath of the first great battle, Terran fleets withdrew to high-alert fallback positions, wary of overextension. The battlefield had been cleared, Council wreckage scattered across parsecs of deep space, a tactical victory. But strategically, the storm was only gathering. Council will be moving their core fleets, Commander Holt said grimly during the debriefing. Keller nodded. Agreed. Their pride won't tolerate a public defeat. They'll escalate. He glanced around the holobriefing chamber. Senior Terran fleet captains, scarred veterans all. Each one knew what was coming. This was round one, Keller continued. Now they'll throw everything they have. And they did. On Council core world Erelath, the mood had shifted overnight. Where once the lords had sneered at the Terran Empire, now they shouted over each other in desperation. "The humans humiliated us," one reptilian lord hissed. "They destroyed an armada, another shrieked. Lord Drelkoth sat silent as chaos swirled. He alone remained cold, calculating. Finally, he stood. "Enough," he growled. "No more piecemeal fleets, no more half measures." His gaze swept the chamber. "I invoke War Protocol Alpha, full council mobilization." Gasps rippled through the lords. Protocol Alpha meant total war. No restraint, no diplomatic pretense. Every fleet, every warship, every soldier brought to bear. "But our treaties," a hesitant voice began. "Are meaningless," Drelkoth spat. "We gave them an ultimatum. They answered with war. Now we finish it." Within hours, the entire Council war machine ground into motion. Hundreds of war fleets assembled. Not just the police actions of before, but ancient, battle-hardened legions drawn from the oldest member species. Supercapitals the size of small moons, planet crackers, siege carriers. And at their heart, the legendary Dread Host, the Council's most feared mobile war group, untouched since the last Galactic War 5 centuries prior. Terran intelligence networks caught the first hints. Partial comms intercepts, unusual fleet movements. Soon, the scale became clear. "Intel confirms full mobilization," Holt reported tensely. "Hundreds of heavy warships. The Dread Host is moving." Around the holotable, the mood turned steel hard. Even Keller felt the weight. The Dread Host wasn't a myth. It had broken entire civilizations in past centuries. Now it was coming for Earth. But humanity didn't plan to die easy. Back on Earth, Grand Marshal Briggs convened the Emergency Council beneath the Atlantic Defense Bunker. Generals, admirals, strategic planners, all hardened by years of dirty border wars, sat in tense silence. Briggs wasted no words. "The Council is coming in force. Total force." He stabbed a finger at the star map. "Our only option? Bleed them. Every system, every jump point. No retreat beyond Earth orbit." He looked each officer in the eye. "We make them pay in blood for every meter of space, until they break, or until we do." The orders went out. Across Terran space, military reserves activated, planetary militias drilled, orbital defenses reinforced. Shipyards ran day and night, pumping out corvettes, drones, gun platforms as fast as human hands and machines could build. Earth itself transformed into a fortress. Aboard Revenant, Keller oversaw it all. His fleet had taken losses, but new ships streamed in from deep reserve fleets. Fresh Marines arrived. Veteran gunners reassigned. Every spare hull was pressed into service. Holt stood beside him as they reviewed the latest readiness reports. "We won't be able to stop their whole fleet," Holt said quietly. "Not if they come full force." "No," Keller agreed, "but we can gut them. Force them to rethink. Force them to pay." The first signs of the counter-offensive came days later. Outpost Sigma-9, an isolated Terran research colony near the border, went dark without warning. Recon drones found only wreckage. Council advance elements had struck, testing Terran reactions. Then Beta Station, a critical fuel depot, fell under heavy assault. Terran defenders fought hard, 4 days of brutal close-quarters combat, but were eventually overwhelmed. The war had begun in earnest. Keller watched the reports come in, losses mounting, skirmishes erupting across the border. But these weren't random strikes. The Council was probing, trying to draw Terran fleets out, thin their defenses. Clever. But Keller wasn't taking the bait. "Hold our core lines," he ordered. "Let them overextend." When the Dread Host finally made its move, it was impossible to hide. Terran deep space sensors lit up with hundreds of warp signatures, an entire wall of Council warships moving as one. "They're coming straight for Earth," Holt said grimly. "ETA 4 days. Keller studied the projection. Good. Let them come. In orbit above Earth, the final defenses took shape. Orbital battle stations armed, planetary shield grids activated, fleets arrayed in layered formation, even civilian sectors prepared, evacuation drills, emergency bunkers readied. There was no false hope here, no illusions. Every Terran soul knew what was coming. And aboard Revenant, Keller stood before his crew one final time. "We've bled them once," he said quietly. "Now they think they can break us. But this is our home. They'll find no surrender here." As the Council Dread Host entered Terran space, war drums echoed across the stars. The next battle would decide everything. 4 days. That's all the time Earth had. 4 days to prepare before the Dread Host arrived. Aboard the Revenant, Keller barely slept. There was too much to oversee. Fleet positioning, orbital defense grids, logistics coordination. And deep down, he knew. This wasn't just another battle. This was it. The coming assault would either break the Council's will or humanity's back. Grand Marshal Briggs's orders were blunt. No withdrawal, no surrender. We fight to the last. That order had gone out across all Terran forces. On Mars, newly constructed rail platforms went hot. Massive city-sized cannons pointed toward deep space. On Luna, fighter squadrons armed, launch bays stacked with interceptors. On Earth itself, civilian populations hunkered deep beneath the crust in hardened bunkers. Every able-bodied man and woman prepared to fight if it came to ground war. Every orbital yard, every defense station, every ship was fully armed. And still, it might not be enough. Holt stood beside Keller as the countdown reached its final day. "Council advance elements already skirmishing on the outer defense ring," Holt reported. "Probe attacks, trying to map our response." Keller studied the star map. Thousands of Council vessels now visible on long-range scans, moving with frightening coordination. "They're not looking for weaknesses," Keller said flatly. "They're softening us up." Holt grimaced. "Then it starts soon." "Soon," Keller agreed. The Dread Host wasn't a myth anymore. It filled the void with cold reality. Lead ships the size of small cities, support flotillas of cruisers, siege platforms, planetary assault carriers. And at its heart, the ancient Council flagship, Harbinger of Dawn, a vessel older than humanity's space age, bristling with unthinkable firepower. As the first Council ships breached the Terran outer ring, Keller gave the long-anticipated order. "All batteries, weapons free, hold nothing back." The siege of Earth began. The void lit with war. Terran defense platforms opened fire, hypervelocity rail slugs, plasma storms, guided antimatter warheads. Council ships returned fire in kind, plasma lances, graviton shear beams, wave after wave of drone swarms. In the first hour, Terran minefields claimed dozens of Council Vanguard ships. But the Dread Host pressed on, unstoppable mass, shields layered and reinforced, absorbing staggering punishment. "Section 17, Alpha reports breached," a comms officer called. Keller's jaw clenched. "Reinforce, no gaps." Second hour. Council siege carriers launched planet cracker missiles toward Earth. Intercept squadrons scrambled, fighters weaving through heavy flak, intercepting with suicide runs if necessary. Some missiles got through, only to be caught by Earth's newly deployed planetary shield grid, shimmering against the impacts. But the strain was showing. Third hour. Council heavy artillery platforms engaged. Orbital stations took brutal hits. One station near Mars shattered in a blinding explosion, killing its entire crew. Keller's fists tightened behind his back, losses mounting, fleet cohesion under strain. But morale held. No Terran ship broke formation. Fourth hour. Council boarding craft made their first runs, elite troops trying to capture key orbital platforms. Terran Marines met them in savage close-quarters combat. On Defense Platform Titan III, Sergeant Mason Briggs, son of the Grand Marshal, led a desperate defense. Hallways choked with smoke, metal floors slick with blood. "Hold this line," Mason roared. "They step through, they die!" His Marines answered with gunfire and grit, Council shock troops falling in heaps under pulse fire and blades. Aboard Revenant, Keller monitored every front. His fleet was fully committed, engaging the Council siege line with brutal tenacity. But the sheer mass of the dread host kept pressing. "Council pushing hard on our left flank," Holt warned. "If they breach—" "They won't," Keller cut him off. "Signal Hades wings, redeploy, bleed them." Hades wings swept in, assault cruisers and strike frigates punching deep into the enemy flank, sowing chaos. The left held, barely. But the price was high. Fifth hour. Dozens of Terran ships lost, orbital stations crippled, thousands dead. Still, Keller stood unflinching. He'd bled under the Council's guns before, watched cities burn, watched comrades die. He would not yield now. Sixth hour. The battle reached a brutal crescendo. Council dreadnoughts pushed to within firing range of Earth itself, barely held back by the last Terran defense ring. Aboard Harbinger of Dawn, Lord Drelkoth watched with narrowed eyes. "The humans fight like cornered beasts," his aide hissed. "No," Drelkoth corrected coldly. "They fight to survive. There is no corner. For them, it is victory or extinction." He respected it in a way, but it would not save them, or so he thought. Seventh hour. Keller unleashed his final gambit, the Hellfire Protocol, an array of prototype super-heavy rail platforms hidden deep in Luna's crust activated, massive kinetic lances fired, spears of metal moving at near-light speed. Council supercapitals imploded under the impacts. Even Harbinger of Dawn took heavy damage. One side of its hull torn open, bleeding atmosphere and crew. The Dreadhost staggered. Council lines faltered. On every channel, reports flooded in. Council retreat signals detected. Eighth hour. The Council armada, once unstoppable, began a fighting withdrawal. Aboard Revenant, Keller exhaled slowly. "They're pulling back," Holt confirmed. We held." Silence fell on the bridge. Thousands dead. Half the fleet lost. Orbital space a graveyard of shattered metal, but Earth still stood. Keller looked out at the ruined void. They had survived. For now. The void above Earth looked like a graveyard. Burned-out Council dreadnoughts drifted alongside the broken hulks of Terran warships. Wreckage fields stretched for thousands of kilometers. Twisted metal, shattered hulls, frozen bodies suspended in the black. Earth had survived. But the price had been staggering. Aboard the Revenant, Admiral Keller stood at the wide viewport. His uniform was scorched, his face drawn from exhaustion, but his posture remained unbroken. Commander Holt approached, voice low. "Recovery team still pulling survivors from the wreckage. Final fleet status, grim. We've lost nearly 40% of the line ships. Defense platforms crippled. Orbital shields strained beyond safe limits." Keller nodded once. "And the Council?" "Confirmed retreat beyond Terran space. Their fleet's in shambles. Dreadhost crippled, dozens of core warships destroyed, but... Holt hesitated. Keller didn't need him to finish. They'll regroup. The war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. In the Atlantic defense bunker, Grand Marshal Briggs stared at the star maps projected above the war table. Earth had bled, hard. But the Council had bled worse, and the message had been sent to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity would not kneel. Across neutral systems, whispers spread like wildfire. The Terrans held. They stood against the Dreadhost and survived. Perhaps the Council isn't invincible after all. Minor worlds, once cowed into silent compliance, began questioning Council authority. Trade embargoes wavered. Some systems even sent cautious signals of support to Earth. But there was no time to celebrate. On Revenant's bridge, Keller convened his surviving captains. The men looked battered, faces lined with fatigue, uniforms torn, some carrying bandages, but their eyes burned with the same cold fire. "We've bloodied them," Keller began. His voice was gravel, but steady. "But this war isn't won. The Council will regroup. They'll strike again." He paused, gaze hard. "This time we don't wait. We take the fight to them." The plan was bold. Dangerous, but necessary. Strike into Council core territory before they could rebuild. Hit supply lines, cripple shipyards, keep them off balance. Grand Marshal Briggs approved without hesitation. Humanity wasn't just defending anymore. Now they were going to retaliate in full. Reinforcements streamed in from across Terran space. Damaged ships were patched. Fresh hulls launched from deep yard reserves. Battle-hardened crews rotated in from garrison forces. On Luna, Sergeant Mason Briggs limped through the hospital wing, arm bandaged, face bruised from brutal boarding action wounds. But his eyes were sharp as ever. When the call for new boarding teams went out, he signed up immediately. All of humanity was in this fight now. Within weeks, the first Terran strike force, led by Revenant, jumped beyond the outer Council sectors. The first target, Sarnax Station, a key Council shipyard deep within secure space. Unprepared for a Terran offensive, Revenant dropped out of FTL first, flanked by a fresh escort wing. The stars gleamed cold. Ahead, the massive shipyard spun above a green-gray world, thousands of workers scrambling as Terran forces arrived. "Launch!" Keller's order was curt. Strike craft swarmed forward, torpedoes, rail cannons opening fire. Sarnax burned within hours. Council reinforcements arrived too late, ambushed by Terran Wolfpack squadrons. The first blow of humanity's counterstrike had landed, and the message spread again. Earth doesn't wait to be attacked anymore. Back on Council core world Erelath, Lord Drelkoth sat in grim silence. Reports streamed in. Sarnax destroyed. Terran forces advancing beyond outer sectors. "Their fleet should be crippled," one subordinate wailed. "They're not," Drelkoth growled. "We underestimated them. Again." His eyes burned with cold fury. This war would not be won with pride or numbers alone. The Terrans fought like they had nothing to lose, and that made them dangerous beyond measure. Aboard Revenant, Keller watched the enemy retreat from Sarnax with grim satisfaction, but he felt no triumph, just purpose. "Next target," he told Holt. The war was just beginning. The galaxy was bleeding. Since Earth's impossible stand against the Dreadhost, nothing was the same. The Council's aura of invincibility had cracked. News of Terran counterstrikes spread like wildfire across neutral and border worlds. Human fleets striking deep into Council space. Sarnax shipyards destroyed. Council forces retreating from contested sectors. And still the Terran fleets advanced. Aboard Revenant, Admiral Keller barely left the command deck. The offensive was gaining momentum faster than anyone expected. Fresh victories piled up, supply hubs raided, communication relays crippled, Council patrol fleets ambushed and torn apart. The Terrans moved fast. Brutal. Unrelenting. But Keller knew this wasn't just a string of raids. It was a test, a war of endurance now. Humanity couldn't match the raw numbers of the Council, but they could outfight them, outthink them, and force the war into the Council's heart. Next phase targets prepared, Commander Holt reported. The man looked worn. Weeks of constant combat showed in every line of his face, but his voice remained sharp. Multiple secondary shipyards, 3 fuel depots, and a key hyperspace relay station. Hitting them will cripple Council fleet movements in this sector. Keller studied the holomap. Good. Time to remind them. Earth strikes where it pleases. In the Council war chambers on Araloth, chaos ruled. The lords argued, shouted, blamed. "The humans are in our core sectors," one avian lord screeched. "Our fleets are stretched thin. We can't defend everywhere," another barked. "Then strike back." Lord Drelkoth sat cold and silent, watching the spectacle. Fools. They still didn't understand what they faced. This wasn't a war of territory anymore. This was a war of survival. And fractures were spreading. Council client worlds, once loyal out of fear, began withdrawing tribute fleets. Governors refused orders. Some border systems quietly contacted Terran agents, hedging their bets. Humanity had done what no race had managed in centuries, made the Council bleed, made them doubt. But the Council was far from beaten. Aboard Revenant, the next strike began. Target, Armax Relay, a critical hyperspace hub connecting half the Council's fleet lanes. Without it, Council reinforcements would crawl through deep space, days, weeks too late. The Terran strike force dropped in without warning. No grand announcement, no diplomacy. Just war. Phase 1, Wolfpack corvettes disabled the outer beacons. Phase 2, Hades wings launched saturation strikes on the relay's shield array. Phase 3, Terran Marines boarded the station itself. Sergeant Mason Briggs was there, his first deep strike op since the Siege of Earth. Boarding pods slammed into the relay hull. Sparks showered the corridors. Pulse rifles barked. "Move!" Mason shouted, leading his team through smoke-filled hallways. Council defenders fought hard, desperate, but the Terran Marines were harder. Room by room, they cleared the relay. By dawn cycle, Armax Relay was in Terran hands, its core systems rigged with demolition charges. No salvage, no mercy. When the charges blew, the shockwave rippled through Council comm networks, cutting entire fleet sectors off from command. Another blow landed, but with every victory came greater risk. Council fleet movements grew more erratic, traps set, ambushes laid. 1 week later, Task Force Sigma, a veteran Terran strike group, walked into a Council trap near the Perith cluster. Heavy losses. 2 destroyers lost. 1 battlecruiser crippled. Survivors barely escaped. Keller read the after-action report in silence. The Council was adapting. Learning. Good. A worthy enemy made victory sweeter. But not all battles were in space. On Araloth, Council politics turned vicious. Accusations flew. Traitors, incompetence, sabotage. Some lords called for negotiation. Others demanded total war, planetary cleansing if necessary. The ruling cabal fractured. Factions rose. Old rivalries flared. Drelkoth watched it all and planned. He'd fought humans long enough to know the Council couldn't win this war through brute force anymore. It would take ruthlessness, precision. A war fought in the shadows as much as the stars. And soon, his agents moved. Aboard Revenant, Keller sensed the shift. Intel reports hinted at new Council tactics: sabotage cells, false flag attacks, assassination attempts. The war was entering its darkest phase, but Keller thrived in darkness. Ready the next strike groups, he told Holt. Sir, fatigue levels are rising, Holt warned. Crew rotations falling behind. We risk burnout. Keller's gaze hardened. We don't stop now. Every day we push forward, we force them back on their heels. We give Earth one more day to live. And that was all that mattered. As the next wave of Terran fleets burned toward their targets, Keller stood alone for a moment on the observation deck. Outside, the stars were cold, unforgiving. But so was he. This wasn't about victory anymore, not about glory or pride. It was about survival, about making sure no Terran child would ever live under a council boot again. And for that, Keller would burn the galaxy if he had to. The war was grinding now. No clear end, no mercy. But humanity was still standing. And the fight was far from over. The war had become a grinding nightmare. Across council space, burned worlds and shattered stations marked the path of the Terran fleets. Humanity no longer fought to defend alone. Now they advanced, system by system, bleeding the council with every strike. But the price was high. On Revenant, Admiral Keller sat in the war room, expression carved from stone. Loss reports scrolled across the holofeed. Task Force Theta, 60% losses. Forward Supply Depot, sabotaged. Boarding Operation Delta 5, successful but 80% Marine casualties. Commander Holt entered quietly. He looked older now, a man aged 10 years in 6 months of war. Intel update, sir. Keller looked up. Go. The Council's desperate. We've confirmed it. Multiple factions splintering. But Holt hesitated. They're planning something. Big. Keller's eyes narrowed. Details. What Holt laid out chilled even Keller's war-hardened blood. Project Helios. A last-ditch council weapon. A planet-killer warhead. Prototype status unknown. Loaded aboard a stealth carrier. Target, Earth. If they can't beat us in space, Holt said grimly, they'll try to end us with one strike. Keller's decision was instant. We intercept, no matter what it takes. Orders went out. Every Terran asset diverted to hunt down the Helios carrier. Fleet tracking nets scrambled. Wolf packs deployed on extended range patrols. Deep infiltration teams activated. If the Helios slipped through, the war would be over. For 3 weeks, the hunt dragged on, a race against time. Council decoys scattered the search, ghost signals, false trails, entire strike groups wasted on phantom targets. Then a Wolfpack unit, Squadron Black Talon, caught a break. A damaged council freighter, limping from a failed supply run, intercepted near the Iradan Nebula. Its data cores revealed the truth. The Helios carrier was real, and already en route to Sol. Revenant burned engines red hot, racing to intercept. Every fleet element available joined the pursuit. Hades wings, surviving battle cruisers, corvette squadrons running ahead as scouts. There would be no margin for error. And aboard the Council's Helios carrier, CSV Eclipse, Lord Drelkoth himself rode in cold silence. He had no illusions anymore. The Council had lost the initiative, lost the war of perception. Now it was survival through annihilation. If he could not bring Earth to heal, he would erase it. One strike, one end. But the humans had grown too skilled, too fast, too ruthless. Revenant caught up in the outer soul boundary, barely in time. The Eclipse emerged from FTL, shadowed, fast, burning for Earth. Keller stood on the command deck, voice hard. All ships, intercept course. We stop that carrier or we die trying. The final chase began. Space lit with fire. Terran intercept squadrons swarmed in, weaving between Eclipse's brutal escort screen. Council warships fought like cornered animals, guns blazing, no retreat. Revenant's rail batteries fired salvo after salvo, cutting deep into the escort formation. Corvettes sacrificed themselves to break shield nodes. Fighters ran suicide runs to punch holes for the main fleet. And still Eclipse barreled forward, its Helios warhead armed, countdown active. In the middle of the storm, Mason Briggs and his Marine strike team launched one last boarding run. Their target, Eclipse's bridge. Boarding pods slammed into the hull. Hatches blew. Marines poured in, guns blazing. Mason fought like a man possessed, leading his team through smoke and blood, corridors choked with wreckage. The fighting was savage, council guards fanatical, knowing their mission. But room by room, Terran Marines advanced. On Revenant, Keller watched the battlefeeds, jaw set like iron. "We need that warhead offline." Now Mason's team reached the core chamber as Helios countdown reached final minutes. Explosions rocked the ship. Terran and Council forces locked in a final death grapple. Mason himself reached the warhead bay, wounded, out of breath, rifle out of ammo. He didn't hesitate. Demo charges placed, countdown overridden. As the final Council defenders stormed the chamber, Mason triggered the charges. CSV Eclipse detonated in a white-hot supernova. Warhead neutralized, carrier obliterated. On Revenant's bridge, Holt whispered, They did it." Keller didn't speak, just exhaled once, the tightest battle of his life. Earth was safe, for now. When the news broke, it shattered what remained of Council unity, their last gambit, their ultimate weapon. Gone. Across the galaxy, neutral worlds openly defied Council edicts. Systems declared independence. Tribute fleets defected. Even entire Council races began seeking private negotiations with Terran command. The tide had turned. Aboard Revenant, Keller stood at the star map. The Council retreating across half the front, morale in tatters. He knew better than to call it a victory yet. The war would go on. But now humanity fought from strength, not survival. He allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Mason Briggs, killed in the final detonation, posthumous hero of Earth. Thousands more dead, entire fleets crippled, a galaxy forever changed. But the Council had been taught the oldest truth of war. Ultimatums collapse when the enemy refuses to kneel, and humanity never would.